Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by me. I'm in this episode. What? Episode 299. What to expect from React Native in 5 years with me, Todd Werth.
So after all of these years, Robin, I did finally meet Travis, your husband. I guess he does exist.
It was in question there for a while. I don't think you believed me.
Well, I mean, I had never met him, and he was rarely on camera, which could have been AI. I don't know. Anything?
Yeah, I could have been making him up. No, yeah, he is real, and you met him this past weekend.
He's a cool guy. He's nerdy in the right ways, like the ways that I enjoy people being nerdy.
What are the wrong ways?
Let's not get into that. There are wrong ways to be nerdy. Maybe not. I don't know. Just maybe ways that
you guys hit it off. We'll say that. I'm sure.
Yeah, he's a cool guy.
He
like
was worried.
Travis.
He was worried about meeting my bosses, plural.
Right.
But he made a good impression, I think.
And we met him at in New Orleans at Gant Laborde, who's one of the owners here at Infinite Red, at his wedding, which Gant is now on his honeymoon. So that was fun. It was on a boat.
That was right.
On the Mississippi River. Just a beautiful wedding. Really awesome.
Yeah, it was fun to get together. Because we see each other in person so rarely.
Yeah, it's true. We're fully remote. So it just, and we have been for, I don't know, it's been almost a decade now.
We were remote before it was cool.
I'm Jamon Holmgren, your host, friendly CTO of Infinite Red, and I am joined here by my mesmerizing co-host, Robin Heinze, who is our director of engineering. And then our guest host today is Todd Werth, our CEO and also an owner here at Infinite Red with me and Gant. Todd, welcome to the program. You're normally on the other side of this, doing the editing and whatnot, but I appreciate you joining us as a guest host today.
I do mostly whatnot. But, thank you
the
for
whatnot
having
part,
me.
that kind of covers everything. Yeah, exactly.
The listeners enjoy the stupid brought to you bys at the beginning of the episode. I did them. If you did not enjoy, then we hired that out. So
yeah, that was clearly not Todd. You can't tell that by his voice. Before we get into our topic today, and I will talk about why Todd's on the program in just a second, let's hear from our sponsor. This episode is sponsored, as always, by Infinite Red. Infinite Red is a premier React Native consultancy located fully remote in the US and Canada. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next project, hit us up at infinite.red/React Native. And don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. All right. Let's get into our topic for today. We are going to be talking about React Native in 5 years. We're going to look forward a ways and see what, based on what we're seeing, try to do some predictions, some prognostication, some, I don't know. We're going to try to peer into the future.
The fortune teller, like that you see in the tent with the crystal ball.
Yes. That's exactly how we are right now in Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
We're just kind of hovering over a crystal ball. We're looking into it and we're seeing where React Native is going to be in 5 years.
It's kind of crowded in here and Jamon keeps touching me.
I knew this was a mistake. All right. Anyway, most of you all don't know Todd very well. You're going to get to know him very well in this episode. So Todd, like 10 years ago, you and we were talking about merging our companies together. That's a whole nother episode. Well, I guess we did a whole series of episodes in Building Infinite Red. People want to hear all about that. But we were talking about bringing our two companies together and merging. And we were both doing iOS native development at that time. And then React Native for iOS came out in like spring of 2015. Android came out later in September, but we were talking and you brought it up. You're like, hey, this React Native thing looks pretty cool. It was one of those things I remember you telling me like, hey, we need to probably pay attention to this because we're starting to get people asking about Android versions of apps. We don't really like doing native Android. We're more iOS developers. So maybe there's a way we can use this instead of, having to basically write two apps.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly what brought React Native on my radar. But I did take a look at it one weekend, and I spent the weekend just doing a sample app, seeing if it's anything we're very interested in. I know I pinged you about it. After that weekend, I sent it over to Steve, who was a team member at the time, and asked him to look at it and see if he liked it. And then he did like it, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, we had a bunch of conversations because we were still in the middle of summer, kind of doing our thing, merging the two companies together. And then I remember when we finally got to where we were ready to hit the ground running, we had 2 projects ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And Steve was going to run one of them. Gant was running the other one. And you were like, hey, instead of doing native iOS, let's just do these in React Native, or at least consider it. And both Gant and Steve took a look at it at that point.
Yeah, I actually had to go talk to those 2 customers. One who was in San Diego, I just talked to on Zoom or whatever it was at the time. And the other, I went to Vancouver, British Columbia to talk to that client. And both of them agreed to try React Native.
Yeah.
We still do maintenance work for one of those clients.
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
By the way.
And the other one's still running their app.
I don't know I don't know what they've done with it, but it's still in the App Store.
The reviews have dropped off. They really need to give us a call. But anyway,
You know who you are if you're listening.
That was kind of a look back. And what really attracted us to React Native at that time was the fact that you could write one time for the most part. Actually, I remember we were talking and we were like, hey, if we can get 50% code reuse, that's already like a bonus. And I think that's one of the problems with a lot of people is they'll be like, oh, if it's not 100% code reuse, then it's a failure. It's like, no, like, have you ever had to write 2 apps before? Like, that's a whole lot of work. If you can gain 50%, that would be nice.
I mean, I was very skeptical because I'm a software engineer.
Yeah, exactly. But in our first apps, I think that we got around 90% code reuse. And this was early days. This was React Native 0.11, I want to say, something like that.
We still probably hit close to that, if not more in some cases. I mean,
I think it's way more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like 95, 98% now because there's so many more like libraries that are pre-built that we were having to write those things back then.
Yeah,
and we don't have to do that anymore.
When you start adding in web, the percentages go down. But for iOS and Android, it's really like 98, 99% usually.
I'm new to this. Do we make up numbers in every episode? I'll try jokes.
Trying material. Yeah.
They may not work.
So what I want to do is look back over those years. And if we're trying to look forward 5 years, it's helpful to look back 5 years and see where were we at that time. So Robin, let's look at the biggest changes in the last 5 years that you see.
So I was looking at what version was out 5 years ago, and it was right around so we're talking 2019. And that was the year that 0.60 came out. Mm-hmm. And if you remember,
that was a big one.
That was a big one because it introduced auto linking, I think Android X, Jetpack. Those all happened around there, which was it was a big deal because it was
remember
a big
Jetify?
Yeah. Jetify.
That was part of Android X, I think.
It was a big deal, and it kind of reminds me of the change that we're looking at with the new architecture right now, because it required so much of the community to make updates to their libraries to support auto linking, and it was a huge effort of getting library authors and maintainers on board. So it was kind of a turning point, and in my memory, that sort of started a new era of React Native, of stability and reliability, and how every release wasn't this huge major breaking change. It kind of became sort of like a real player for companies that needed a stable and reliable choice.
There's a little bit of a attitude change even around that time, around like, okay, let's make upgrades a little bit easier, like you said, and whatnot. Now on Ignite, which is our boilerplate project and what we use to start nearly every project, we started doing things like adding TypeScript by default. So TypeScript was becoming a major thing. We needed it. So we brought in TypeScript. At that time, we had a lot of hacks for type issues. TypeScript itself has improved since then. React Navigation version 3 was a pretty big change as well. And I remember us having to deal with that. But interestingly, our stack hasn't changed a lot in the last 5 years.
I know. I was looking at it and thinking about it, and we use the same stack, Infinite Red anyway, that we did 5 years ago because it works so well. And why change it if it's working?
The biggest change is Expo.
Yep. I would say 2019 Expo was still, it was kind of a novelty. It was new. It was something that was kind of looked at as, oh, you use this if you're just like demoing something or doing a proof of concept or like want to show someone this little trick. You can like send an Expo stack. Like it had a lot of stigma attached to it because you still had to eject if you wanted to do anything native or use any library that did anything native that wasn't like officially Expo supported. Those days, it really wasn't a tool that a lot of more serious React Native developers used, which is completely different than today.
We're going to be talking more about this a little bit later, but also I think one of the things that started to kind of stir a little bit 5 years ago was AI. And Gant Laborde here at Infinite Red started to take a look at it and became kind of obsessed with it. And this was 5 years ago, well before ChatGPT, well before Copilot. This was the early days, and he ended up writing a book about it and things like that. So that was pretty new. He was like, hey, this AI thing's really cool. It's going to be a big deal. And we were all like, okay, interesting. And, we're obviously in the last 5 years, it has been a major change. But I want to ask, like, why is the industry moving so slowly in general? It feels like a lot of the stuff 5 years ago, we're still doing today.
That's a great question. I was actually talking to someone about this recently. I started my career in the 90s, and of course, everything moved very fast, and then it slowed down, and then the Google, Facebook era came, and everything started moving really fast again. And we were changing languages and platforms all the time. But yeah, we've been, working in mobile for the last 10 years. We did native, and then we've been doing React Native, and we're probably going to do React Native for quite a while. I don't see anything on the horizon that will replace it. Flutter is trying, like a fish tries to ride a bicycle, and but I don't think they're going to go anywhere. So I think it's just a mature, it's a mature ecosystem. So
yeah, I think there is something to that.
That's what people want out of it. That's the companies that have adopted it want it to be a stable ecosystem.
Yeah. So let's start talking about the future now, 5 years from now. I think first off, I want to talk about the technical side of it. Robin, what do you see where do you see React Native being technically in 5 years?
Well, I think it goes without saying that the new architecture is imminent. And so 5 years from now, it's no longer going to be the new architecture. It's just going to be the architecture. And we're not even going to be talking about it anymore.
Right.
It'll be standard. I personally think that Expo, the company, will be more of what people interact with versus Meta directly.
I agree.
I think Meta will always maintain React Native core, but in terms of the people that are using React Native, getting what they need, they'll be going to Expo and turning to Expo for advice, for help, for support, for pretty much everything. I think they're going to be kind of the middle people, so to speak.
Because it works well. I mean,
yeah,
it's hard to argue with that.
And Meta, they have some brilliant engineers there, and they're working on some really cool stuff. But they're also they're building for their internal customers, which are more enterprise level. They have kind of like their own internal tooling. They're not really as connected to the like product companies that are using React Native.
They don't have an incentive to be. That's not who they're serving. They built React Native for their
Meta
proprietary, for Meta's apps. Whereas Expo, their business model, it relies on React Native users, everybody else. We are their audience, and they are like serving us, and that's their goal. So,
and us at Infinite Red are exactly the same. Like, we're on the Expo side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, I think that there's a couple of things I want to call out as well. One is Expo Router. I think that Expo Router will be just how pretty much everybody builds React Native apps, whether you're using Expo or not. I think is just going to be.
I mean, it'll be the new.
Of course, you use React Expo router.
It will basically be the new React navigation, and I say that kind of tongue in cheek because
it's built on top.
It's built on top of React navigation. It's just React navigation doesn't have Expo in the name, so.
Right.
But really, like, everyone will use Expo router, and you say whether or not they use Expo, it's like they're already kind of using Expo router because they're using React navigation, which is an Expo product.
React navigation is largely built by Expo. I mean, there's some others involved as well.
Brent Vatney still does play a large role in React navigation. So, but it's like very
and
Expo.
Funded by it.
Yeah, it's funded by Expo.
Now,
it's supported by Expo. So
the other big one I think is React Server Components. Evan actually tweeted recently about Evan Bacon from Expo tweeted about controlling native apps from a server and being able to render native views from a server. And I think that the React Server Components are going to be unlocking some experiences. We're not quite ready to talk about those things yet in this episode, but that's a prediction that I have, is that React Server Components are going to be a pretty big deal. The other thing I want to talk about, I don't want this episode to be all about AI, but you can't really ignore it on a 5-year time span here. So if we keep it narrow to React Native, like not going off to everything else AI can do, I want to talk a little bit more about how AI is going to be applied to building apps, mobile apps. And I think, first off, will mobile apps even still be relevant? Will people still want to have a phone in their hand in 5 years with apps that they launch?
It's a really good question. I wish I knew the answer, but...
Oh, I know the answer.
Oh, okay, Todd. What does your crystal ball say?
I don't know, but there's this really handsome man staring back at me when I look at it.
I'm sorry for staring.
I think AI is going to replace lots of apps, whether it's on the phone or it's on your watch. But there'll be a need for apps because there's so many different user interfaces that just are visual.
So React Native could become basically a vessel for AI.
Really going to be interesting is, it's already happened, but when Apple starts putting AI features on the phone and Google puts them on Android.
Yeah, and efficient. Hopefully in 5 years, they'll be quite battery efficient, power efficient, not blowing up your phone with, with heat every time you try to calculate a sentence.
Hey, sometimes you just need hand warmers. You can just take your iPhone.
I've been playing with the new social media app AirChat, which is interesting because it does use voice. It uses voice as the way to, you communicate with other people. It's sort of like short voice tweets, basically, that you're sending back and forth. And it transcribes them using AI. And the AI transcription does an incredible job. It's so good. It's so much better than Siri or any of these others. But what's interesting is the app is still there. It's still necessary. It's still an important part of it. You still need the structure of the app around it. So I think I agree with you, Todd, that even with AI things coming in, there's still going to be like the infrastructure around it it's going to be apps, and that's how people want to do it. And phones are just too useful of a paradigm. There's also, I forget what it's called, Humane, I think, the Humane pin. That thing that you put,
that thing has been shredded on reviews.
Yeah. It's been completely destroyed in reviews. And that just sort of shows that, even if you were to execute that perfectly and have it be really fast and responsive and more accurate, I think even then the utility is just not the same as a phone. It's like, I want to watch a video. I can't do that, just with audio.
What did the Humane... I'm not as with it on the trending topics. What does this pin do?
It's a small device that connects to your shirt via a magnet, and it has a little touchpad, and it has a bunch of sensors, and it has a little projection screen that projects on your hand. And basically it's like, it's all done with AI and you can talk to it. The major problems with it is two, in my opinion. One is it's just not polished enough. And the big one is it's, not polished enough and slow. The big one is it doesn't integrate with your phone. And I get that they're trying to make their own ecosystem, but good luck. Like, I have my phone, I have my watch, and then I have this other thing that doesn't integrate with them.
Yeah.
Like, I want what that device does, but I want it on my watch.
And I'm a little bit dubious that I want what that device does. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I already wear an Apple Watch and I have, all this stuff right there, sensors and everything. Why would I pin something to my shirt? Anyway, we're getting far afield here, but
I knew this would happen when we put AI on the agenda. It always happens.
The point is that apps are still necessary in these cases. Like we want to integrate with our phone because we want to integrate with apps. We want to integrate with those things. We don't want it necessarily just to be, something that's completely controlled with your voice and that sort of thing.
Sorry for continually stealing all this time. I just want to say, as far as developers and AI, I'm never worried about this stuff. My stepfather in the 70s, when they started a project, they would select the server. It came with a programming language, which they had to learn. And then they'd spend 6 months creating the data store because databases didn't exist. Mm-hmm. Obviously, all that stuff's gone, and we're still here. And
we still have jobs. Like, I'm sure that if they knew what technology we had now, they'd be like, oh, like there's not going to be any jobs.
Our job is to build value for end customers using technology.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it will always be that.
The way I always talk about it is it's like we may not code by hand like I did when I was 12. Speaking of the industry moving slowly.
You haven't done it since you were 12. I'm just kidding.
That's
amateur hour. I coded with my feet.
You guys are not following my point here. My point is we are still doing it like when I was 12. And this, may change that, but we're still developing, we're still aligning software with humans. And that's the important part here. It's much more of a coordination thing. Now, bringing it back to React Native, I think this is the biggest competitor to React Native in 5 years. It's not Flutter. It's not Kotlin multi-platform. It's not, there's some random dude in my Twitter mentions who keeps on bringing up Delphi for some reason.
Delphi was awesome.
Sounds sounds like a fraternity or sorority.
I won't explain what it is, but it was very cool in the 90s.
Well, it still exists apparently, and you can build mobile apps with it. So that's a fun one. Anyway, I think the biggest competitor will be AI, potentially something like, hey, describe your app, in plain English or some sort of structured English, but it doesn't have to be so structured as coding. And then it actually emits native code. It builds your native code for you. And at the end of it, you have 2 native apps. And if it works well enough, which in 5 years, maybe it will, then maybe you could just have that intermediate language. And if something's wrong, you just go in there, sort of like Expo's like continuous native generation, but you do it with AI instead of Expo. And then some way to kind of validate that. You have tests and whatnot. So that's probably the biggest competitor, but I don't think that's necessarily 5 years out. I think that's probably closer to 10 years out.
It's more than that. Apple's going to create an ecosystem, and so is Google, and so is ChatGPT, and so is what's the name of Claude?
Anthropic. Yeah.
Anthropic. And so is Anthropic. Anthropology, yes. They're going to build a system where you don't have to make an app at all because they have the whole infrastructure for the AI. You build everything through the AI. It executes through the AI, and it's all through the APIs of the phone and stuff.
So you think that apps will be obsolete?
Not all apps, but I think a lot of stuff will be. I mean, I have apps I wrote that would do different processing for reports I have to do at my job. I now have a prompt where I used to have an app I wrote. And more and more things, my apps, and I'm doing little quotation marks here, are prompts.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So you're definitely on the side of like apps will reduce in.
Well, I think they're important for when you need something visual in the UI.
Yeah. From my perspective, the way that I see it is that AI will be sort of like Excel. Excel or Google Sheets or similar takes the place of a broad swath of programs that would exist.
Oh, yeah.
I agree.
And people just build them and they use them and then they throw them away. And AI will be like that. But there's a whole industry of replacing Excel spreadsheets with apps. So
right. There's like literally people whose jobs is just to be really good at Excel. And there's going to be people whose job is to be really good at creating mobile apps with AI.
All right. One last question. Where do you want it to be? And Todd, I want to ask you from a business perspective, Infinite Red, where do you want React Native to be?
Where I want to be? from a business standpoint, it's always exciting to have new technology, and it gives us a lot of places to innovate for our customers. You don't want things to stagnate. Yeah, sure, it's easy, but you don't want things to stagnate. That's not good for the industry. So I'm always very excited about new tech, not just because I like it personally, but from a business standpoint, it just gives everyone a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Robin, I want you to give me from your like engineering perspective.
I mean, engineers want it to be like new and exciting and not staying the same, because that's just more fun for our job. But personally, I think that what I would really love to see is for React Native to have like a place in the tech world that isn't so questioned. Like, native developers are always like, oh, like React Native is not as good as native, and we know that it is. And I would love to see in 5 years for everyone to just see React Native as a normal way to make apps and not need to justify itself all the time.
I love that answer, because it does get tiring having to justify it all the time.
And we will justify it all day because we know what it can do.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I would rather we didn't have to.
Exactly.
Do you love my answer, Jamon? No. He's for you who can't see him, he's just staring at me.
So I want to take it from an industry perspective. So we got Todd's business perspective, we got Robin's engineering perspective, and I want to talk more broadly from an industry perspective. It is much easier to build for some platforms now, but I want it to be easier to build for all platforms, like every platform that exists. No matter what it is, React Native can target that. Hopefully there will be like API continuity between the different platforms. There's parity. We're not like, oh, Mac OS is lagging behind, or tvOS is lagging behind, or whatever. They're all right alongside iOS and Android as first-class citizens within the React Native ecosystem. And because like when I think of building something, I thought about, believe it or not, building a to-do app for myself. And I was like, okay, well, I'll need a Mac app. I'll need an iOS app. It'd be cool to have a web app. And I'm already starting to think about all the platforms that I'd like to deploy to.
Is the most engineer thing ever.
I know.
To be like,
I know.
I need a
it's
to-do
ridiculous.
list instead of using one of the 17.
Can I explain my to-do list? Just
Yes.
so that you know why. Okay. Here's how I work. I need to know what the most important thing is, or the top thing on my list is. It needs to be in big, words right at the top. And that's basically the only thing I see. Already every to-do list goes out the window. They all show way too much information. Only one thing.
I joke with you, but I get it. I get it.
I'm not done. There's more to this.
Okay.
Then I need a big snooze button next to it. When I snooze it, it goes to the bottom of the list and something else pops up. Okay. Because I need to be like, oh, I'm done with email. I'm just going to snooze it until tomorrow. That will then pop back up to the list at the the next day. So it needs to pop back up.
I like this.
The next thing is I need one-offs. So instead of snoozing, you can snooze them, but you can also just check them off and they're gone. But it just continually pops the next thing up into my view, and I'm not seeing everything else, but I'm like, oh, that's very cool. Because otherwise what happens is I see too many other things and I'm like, I don't know which of these I should do. The only decision I have to make is, do I want to do the thing that's showing up, or do I want to snooze it? That's it. That's my only decision. And that's the to-do app that I wanted to build.
See, I joke, but to be honest, I've thought about building my own to-do list as well, because it's such a personal.
Everybody does things
Everybody
differently.
works differently, and none of the usually none of the to-do lists that are out there match exactly what your personal workflow is. And I get it. I make fun of you, but I get it.
I keep on trying to use a to-do list, and I always just fall back to using the calendar.
Yeah.
This is what I fall back to. Literally, the listeners can't see, but this is my like.
She's holding up a Ouija board.
She's holding up a notebook
on my desk, because a notebook I can make exactly what I want it to be. I can just like put stuff where I want it and check it off, and it.
Oh, the other thing I want is some AI integration. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that.
This is.
So just to finish up what I was saying, so I do want React and React Native to be essentially for every platform, and new platforms that come up, which I know Amazon's working on right now, that is considering React Native to be their primary development tool. And I want every platform to be like that. Basically, instead of having your own proprietary, like, hey, you got to use this language and it'll compile to this thing, they just immediately say, we're going to make sure that React Native works with this. And that's it. Like, you just use React Native. And that's the primary way to build for it.
That would be amazing. Like, when something like Vision OS comes out or something like that, like top of mind for every company that does something like that is, of course we'll support React Native. That's probably the first thing we're going to support.
So that's it for the episode. Robin, do you have a mom joke?
I have one from Gantt. I took a poll recently.
Yes.
And I realized 100% of the people in the tent were upset.
That's good.
I thought it was good.
Yeah, it is. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
As always, thanks to our production team, with editor Todd Werth, our assistant editor, this guy, Jed Bartosky, our director of communications and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Our producer and host is Jamon Holmgren, and executive producers and hosts are Robin Heinze and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio wherever you get your podcasts. And leave us a review. We'd love to hear what you think.